The Cascade Mountains stood silent that October morning, their peaks dusted with the season's first hint of snow. 16-year-old Ethan Walker tightened the straps of his worn backpack, glancing once more at his parents who waited at the trailhead. His mother, Claire, clutched a thermos of coffee, eyes lingering on her only son with a kind of protective worry that never really fades. His father, Daniel, a former forest ranger, offered a reassuring nod, though his own jaw was set a little tighter than usual. "Are you sure you don't want us to walk with you?" Claire called, her voice carrying through the cool mountain air. Ethan smiled, confident, almost fearless. "I've done this trail a dozen times. I'll be back before dinner. Promise." He raised his phone, showing the GPS he had marked, then slipped it back into his jacket. The boy had grown up among these woods, hiking since he could barely walk. Scouting badges, weekend treks, nights spent under open skies. He was no stranger to the wilderness. To his parents, he was strong, capable, a young man prepared for the challenges of nature. And yet, as they watched him take those first steps along Heather Lake Trail, an unease settled in, a fleeting shadow of doubt that neither could explain. His red jacket became a shrinking speck against the endless green of pine. He waved once, calling back, "Love you. See you tonight." The sound echoed off the ridges, a voice full of life, full of future. Then he rounded the bend and was gone. It was 8:42 a.m. on October 12th, 2012. Neither Daniel nor Claire knew it would be the last time they saw their son for the next 10 years. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe to Rights of the Darkened for more stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. The first hours passed quietly, almost deceptively. Claire spent the morning preparing Ethan's favorite chili, humming as she chopped onions, comforted by the thought of her son walking among the pines. From the kitchen window, she watched the ridgelines, the clouds drifting lower, the light dimming faster than she expected. By late afternoon, unease began to replace patience. "He should have been back by now," Claire murmured, glancing at the clock for the 5th time in half an hour. Daniel, grading papers at the table, tried to sound calm. "He's probably sitting by the lake thinking. You know how he gets." But his voice betrayed a crack of worry. When the clock struck 7, worry hardened into dread. Ethan's phone went straight to voicemail. The jacket he wore, bright red, impossible to miss, should have stood out against the darkening trails, yet there was no sign. Rain began to fall, first a drizzle, then a steady drumming that swallowed every trace of his footsteps. By 9 o'clock, Daniel's ranger instincts overpowered his patience. He grabbed his radio. "I'm calling it in," he told Claire, his tone clipped decisive. Protocol demanded 18 hours before declaring a hiker missing, but this was no stranger. This was his son. At dawn, search and rescue teams assembled at the trailhead. Flashlights cut through fog, boots splashed against wet soil, and dogs strained at their leashes, desperate to catch a fading scent. Helicopters circled overhead, the beating of their blades echoing like a grim countdown across the valley. Around noon, a deputy jogged back to the command post, her boots caked in mud. "We found his car," she announced. "Keys still inside. Wallet untouched. Gas receipt from that morning." Every detail felt ordinary, yet impossibly wrong. The search expanded. Volunteers combed ridges, calling Ethan's name into canyons that gave nothing back but silence. Flyers were printed overnight, his smiling face plastered across every gas station and diner for miles. Claire refused to sleep, waiting at the ranger station, eyes fixed on the radio for updates that never came. Days blurred together in a nightmare rhythm. False leads, exhaustion, and hope eroded by every hour. Each evening, when the sun slipped behind the peaks, another piece of certainty vanished with it. And still, no trace of Ethan. What began as a hike had become one of the most baffling disappearances in Washington state's history. 3 days into the search, The mountains gave up their first clue. A volunteer spotted Ethan's backpack wedged between two fallen logs near Clearwater Creek, barely 3 miles from the trailhead. The discovery ignited a surge of hope. Maybe he was nearby, injured but alive. Searchers fanned out with renewed energy, combing ravines and ridgelines. But the hope proved short-lived. Inside the pack, most of his supplies were gone. Water bottles, food rations, first aid kit. Only a few items remained. His pocket knife, a damp notebook, and a digital camera. The memory card revealed snapshots of the trail, towering pines, a blurred deer darting through brush, and a final selfie of Ethan smiling at a scenic overlook. Nothing suggested fear. Nothing hinted at struggle. Forensics scoured the area, but found no footprints, no blood, no torn fabric. Nothing to explain why the pack had been left behind. Theories multiplied. Some investigators believed he had slipped into a hidden ravine, his body concealed by thick undergrowth. Others whispered about predators, though no signs of attack were ever found. A darker speculation emerged in late-night conversations. Maybe Ethan had chosen to vanish, to start anew somewhere far from home. Daniel dismissed it outright. He was planning for college. He loved the outdoors, but he loved us more. He wouldn't run. Weeks stretched into months. Helicopters logged over 100 flight hours, covering more than 100 square miles. Dogs searched tirelessly, but the heavy rains had erased nearly every trace. Flyers reached across state lines, even into Canada. Leads trickled in. A boy spotted at a bus station, another working at a construction site. But each one unraveled into disappointment. As winter set in, snow swallowed the mountains, sealing away whatever truth they held. The official search was suspended after 6 weeks, though Daniel refused to stop. Every weekend he returned, retracing paths with volunteers who still believed. Claire, meanwhile, clung to Ethan's notebook, rereading the last words he had scribbled. Half-finished thoughts about college essays, plans for the future he never got to live. The trail had gone cold, and with it, the Caldwell family's certainty dissolved into a silence far more haunting than any answer. The first anniversary of Ethan's disappearance arrived with cruel precision. October air carried the same sharp chill, the same scent of pine that haunted Claire's memory of that last morning. Friends gathered at the local church, candles flickering in the stained glass light. Daniel spoke briefly, his voice steady but hollow, while Claire clutched a framed photo of Ethan in his scout uniform. Their son's face, once a symbol of pride, had become an emblem of absence. By the second year, the community's support softened. Flyers faded from bulletin boards, news coverage dwindled, and the name Ethan Walker slipped quietly from public conversation. For Daniel and Claire, however, the silence was louder than any headline. Birthdays passed with unlit candles. Christmas morning arrived with unopened gifts stacked in a corner, their bright paper dulled by dust. Claire eventually donated them to charity, tears streaking her cheeks as she whispered apologies to the son she still believed might return. Daniel retired early from the Forest Service, unable to patrol the very trails that had swallowed Ethan. He found work as a substitute teacher, grateful for distraction, though every teenage face reminded him of the boy he had lost. Claire poured her energy into advocacy, joining organizations for families of missing children. She spoke at conferences, wrote articles, and became a voice for those living in the endless limbo of unanswered questions. The third and fourth anniversaries passed quietly, marked only by social media posts and private prayers. The mountain remained unchanged, indifferent to human grief. Each visit to the trailhead was a ritual of pain. Flowers left at the signpost, whispered promises into the wind, and the same unanswered echo of Ethan's name. By the 5th year, they sold their home in Everett, moving east in search of distance from memories carved into every street. Spokane offered anonymity, but not escape. Grief traveled with them, stitched into every routine. Claire returned to school, earning a degree in social work and dedicating herself to families in crisis. Daniel found himself drawn to at-risk youth, quietly mentoring students who reminded him of Ethan's curiosity and fire. Years 6 through 9 blurred together. Milestones slipped by unmarked. Hope dimmed from a roaring flame into a fragile ember. Public interest faded completely, replaced by newer tragedies. Yet every night, Claire kept Ethan's photo on the nightstand, whispering goodnight as if he could hear her across the miles of silence. 10 years had passed, but the wound never closed. Instead, it hardened into something they carried quietly, an invisible scar no one else could see. And then, just when life seemed to have accepted absence as permanence, the phone rang. On a gray morning in late January, the call came that shattered the rhythm of survival the Walkers had built. Detective Maria Santos's voice carried a mix of urgency and disbelief. "We need you to come to Portland. A young man has been taken into custody. He claims to be Ethan." Claire's coffee cup slipped from her hands, shattering across the kitchen tile. Daniel gripped the counter as if bracing against a storm. For 10 years they had learned to temper hope, but those words tore open everything they had fought to contain. The drive to Portland stretched endlessly. Rain hammered the windshield, headlights carving tunnels of light through mist. Claire stared out the window, whispering questions to herself. What if it's him? What if he's been alive all along? Why didn't he come home? Daniel's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "One step at a time," he muttered. At the precinct, they were led to a small conference room with a one-way window. On the other side sat a young man, his posture cautious, his hair long and unkempt. His face was leaner, scarred, but his shoulders and jawline struck a painful chord of familiarity. Claire gasped, clutching Daniel's arm. "It's him! Oh my God, it's him!" The door opened. The man looked up, eyes wide, and a tentative smile broke across his face. "Mom! Dad!" His voice was deeper, rougher, but threaded with recognition. Claire rushed forward, enveloping him in a hug she had dreamed of for a decade. He felt solid, warm, real. She wept into his shoulder, whispering, "My boy, you're home." For hours they sat together, the young man recounting a story of survival. He spoke of falling in the mountains, waking disoriented, hitching a ride with a trucker who took him south. He claimed memory loss had kept him from finding his way back. Every detail seemed fragile, stitched together, yet Claire clung to each word. Daniel, though moved, felt unease. Ethan had been left-handed, but this young man reached for his coffee with his right. His laughter was slightly off-pitch, his posture unfamiliar. Detectives listened carefully, recording every word. "We'll need DNA confirmation," Santos explained. "But his knowledge of your family, it's specific. Things never made public." The test results came 3 days later. Claire and Daniel sat at their kitchen table when the phone rang. Detective Santos's tone was heavy, steady. "I'm so sorry. The DNA does not match. He isn't Ethan." The words collapsed something inside Claire. She cried out, clutching her chest, as if grief itself had struck like a blade. Daniel closed his eyes, jaw trembling, as if bracing against another loss of the same son. The young man's true name emerged: James Russo, 26, a drifter from Cleveland. He confessed quietly through tears, "I just wanted a family. I thought, if I could be your son, maybe I could finally belong somewhere." The Walkers left Portland devastated, hearts rebroken. The cruelty of hope had never cut deeper. Yet the case was back in headlines. Ethan's photo filled screens once more, whispers rising across the country. For the first time in years, the silence was broken, and with it came the faintest flicker that the real Ethan might still be out there. 3 weeks after the false reunion in Portland, the Walkers received another call, this time from Detective Santos herself. Her tone carried an urgency different from before, steadier, heavier, as though she had news that could not be ignored. "Claire, Daniel," she said, "the FBI just contacted us. They've uncovered information that may involve Ethan." The Walkers froze. Claire's breath caught. Daniel gripped the receiver so tightly his knuckles paled. After years of silence and one cruel deception, they were afraid to hope again. Yet something in Santos's voice told them this was different. At the FBI field office in Seattle, they met Special Agent Catherine Walsh, a woman whose calm demeanor spoke of years spent confronting humanity's darkest corners. She wasted no time. "For the past 3 years, we've been tracking a trafficking network that operated along the Canadian border. Their targets were young, vulnerable hikers, teenagers traveling alone, backpackers, anyone who could vanish without immediate notice." Claire's stomach turned. "Are you saying Ethan was taken? Not lost, but kidnapped?" "It's a strong possibility," Walsh confirmed. She laid photographs across the table, grainy surveillance stills, mugshots, maps with red lines stretching across Washington into British Columbia. "One of our suspects, a man named Petro, identified Ethan from photos we showed him. According to his testimony, your son wasn't taken by accident. He was watched, tracked, and specifically targeted." Daniel leaned forward, his voice raw. "Targeted? Why?" "Petro claims Ethan was moved to a remote camp in northern British Columbia. Teens were forced into labor, logging under armed guards. He says Ethan was there for nearly 2 years before the camp was abandoned. After that, his trail grew cold. Some captives were relocated south. Others disappeared completely. We don't know which path Ethan followed." Claire's heart pounded. For years she had pictured falls, accidents, even deliberate disappearance. But to imagine her son as prey in an organized crime web was almost unbearable. Yet the knowledge also reignited something long buried, the belief that he might still be alive. The FBI began cross-referencing records, interviewing other families of missing hikers. A chilling pattern emerged. Young people who vanished during the same years, all dismissed as accidents, all potentially victims of the same network. For the first time in a decade, Ethan's case was no longer a cold file gathering dust. It was part of a larger story, one that law enforcement was determined to unravel. Agent Walsh leaned forward, her voice steady but compassionate. "I won't promise miracles, but based on everything we've uncovered, there's a real chance Ethan survived beyond those first years. We're pursuing every lead, and I need you both to be prepared for answers that may be painful, but answers nonetheless." For Claire and Daniel, hope flickered again, fragile yet alive. After 10 years of silence and shadows, they finally had reason to believe their son's story wasn't over. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. In Phoenix, a social worker named Rebecca Martinez contacted the FBI after recognizing Ethan's photo from recent news. She explained that for nearly 8 years, she had worked with a young man named Mark Collins who resembled the missing teenager. He had arrived at a shelter with no ID, suffering from panic attacks, night terrors, and a fear of enclosed spaces. He avoided the outdoors, refusing even to step into the facility's small garden. When Agent Walsh and Detective Santos traveled to Phoenix, they found him in the common room of a residential program. He was tall, lean, with sun-weathered skin and scars that spoke of years lived hard. His hair was longer than Ethan's had ever been, his posture more guarded, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Through the glass, Claire and Daniel weren't allowed to see him yet. But even from photographs, Claire's heart knew. Approaching cautiously, Agent Walsh introduced herself. Mark's body tensed, eyes darting toward exits like a cornered animal. "I haven't done anything wrong," he whispered. "I follow the rules." I work. I don't cause trouble. Walsh assured him he wasn't in trouble, only that she needed to ask about his past. As hours passed, fragments emerged. He remembered being taken while hiking, men with accents speaking a language he didn't know, long drives north into cold forests. He recalled being forced to cut trees, years of moving from camp to camp, and finally, waking one day in Arizona with no memory of how he had crossed. When shown photos of the walkers, his hands shook. "She has my eyes," he said softly, pointing to Claire's picture. "And she smells like coffee and vanilla." It was a detail never published, something only Ethan could know. The DNA test confirmed what his heart had already revealed. Mark Collins was Ethan Walker. The reunion was arranged in a quiet therapy office, designed for fragile moments. Claire entered first, breath caught in her throat. Ethan stood hesitantly, then whispered one word that shattered the years between them. "Mom!" She rushed forward, pulling him into an embrace so fierce it trembled with a decade of loss. Daniel followed, wrapping his arms around them both. Tears streamed freely. For minutes, words failed. The family simply held on, refusing to let go. Ethan was not the same boy who had vanished into the mountains. He was older, scarred, carrying shadows no one else could see. But he was home, and that was miracle enough. Reunion was not the ending. It was the beginning of another journey. Ethan's return brought joy, but also the reality of scars that no one could see. In Phoenix, doctors explained what trauma had done to him. Fragmented memory, survival habits that clung like shadows, and the fear that safety might vanish overnight. Back in Spokane, the Walkers worked carefully to rebuild life as a family. Claire cooked his favorite meals, though Ethan sometimes pushed the plates away, appetite lost to old reflexes of scarcity. Daniel tried to share familiar routines, reading maps, discussing history, but often Ethan retreated into silence, eyes distant, as if still walking through unseen forests. Therapy sessions became a lifeline, guiding them through the slow process of learning how to be together again. Ethan enrolled in community college, choosing to study social work. "I want to help kids who feel forgotten," he told his counselor. His path was no longer about scouting trails or planning wilderness treks. It was about guiding others out of their own wilderness of loss. Though crowds unsettled him and loud noises sparked panic, he found strength in helping those who shared his struggles. Claire watched him with quiet pride. Each laugh, each smile, felt like reclaiming a piece of the boy she thought had been lost forever. Daniel, too, found healing in the small things, teaching Ethan how to drive again, sitting with him at baseball games, learning patience when panic sometimes stole his son's words. Nightmares still came. Sometimes Ethan woke drenched in sweat, convinced he was back in the camps, axes swinging in endless forests. But each morning, he sat at the kitchen table, sunlight warming the pages of his textbooks, while Claire poured coffee and Daniel graded papers. Life was not the same as before, but it was life renewed. For Ethan, survival had become purpose. For his parents, absence had become presence again. And together, they discovered that even after a decade of silence, love could still light the way forward. 10 years had passed between Ethan's wave at the trailhead and the day he stood once more in his parents' arms. In that decade, grief had carved deep valleys through Claire and Daniel's lives. They had lived with silence, with unanswered questions that echoed louder than any words. Yet the mountains that had once swallowed their son could not keep him forever. Against all odds, he had returned. Not unchanged, not unscarred, but alive. The story of Ethan Walker became more than a tale of loss and reunion. It stood as a reminder of resilience, of the quiet strength families summon when hope is all that remains. It showed how love, though battered and tested, can endure years of absence and still recognize its own. Even in the face of trauma, even when memory itself seemed broken, the bond of family carried through. For the Walkers, life moved forward with new meaning. Each sunrise was no longer just another day. It was proof of survival, proof that miracles sometimes emerge from the darkest places. Ethan's laughter, tentative at first, became a healing sound in their home. His choice to help others, to dedicate his life to supporting survivors like himself, turned tragedy into purpose. What had once been a nightmare had been reshaped into a story of endurance and light. And yet, this story is not just theirs. Across the world, countless families still wait for answers, still hold on to photographs and memories, still whisper prayers into the night, hoping for a return. Ethan's journey tells them that even after years of silence, even after every lead seems lost, hope does not have to die. Sometimes, against reason, against statistics, the impossible does happen. So as the Walkers sit together at their kitchen table, coffee steaming, papers spread out, sunlight spilling across their sons' textbooks, they remind us of one truth: love, no matter how tested, can bring the lost back home. Backhand index pointing right if this story moved you. Subscribe to Rights of the Darkened and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive.